Welcome back, Tigers! This is the next video of our Campaign Influence Custom Model Campaign Attribution series and is part 1B for the First Touch Custom Model. You need to complete the steps in part 1A, First Touch Campaign Attribution, before completing the steps in this video. The link is in the description below. The flows we create in this video will be used for other custom models, allowing you to use the same flows for more than one model. Let's hop over to Salesforce and see how to configure these flows. Okay, our next flow is going to be from the campaign member object. So we'll go back to our flows tab and we'll click new flow. This will be a record triggered flow, and this will be on the campaign member. Now this is going to fire when a campaign member is created or updated. So we also have criteria that we want to put in here. We want to have has responded equal to true. So this goes back to we only want the campaign members where they have an engaged status. So this responded checkbox needs to be set to true. And we want only contacts to come in here. So we want the contact ID to not be null. Okay, so only engaged contacts are going to come into this flow. Then we're going to do a get. And we're going to get our opportunity contact role records. And we're going to look for the contact role records that have a contact ID that match the contact ID of this campaign member that came into this flow. Then we're going to look for the created date to be less than the op created date. So we have that formula 180 days prior to the op created date that we created for that other flow. So we're going to use that here, and we're going to say that this date is less than or equal to our campaign member created date. Okay, so this means that 180 days prior to our op created date, we want to make sure that the campaign member was created after that date. So it's within that 180 day threshold or after the op created date before it's closed. And then we also have one other condition we want to check for, which is the opportunity closed or open? Now this is a formula field that we have in the opportunity contact role. So you can go to your object manager, go to the opportunity contact role, and you can create a new formula field that's a checkbox. So I can show you how to do that. And then you're going to look for opportunity closed. So this is the standard closed checkbox that's on the opportunity, and that's all you need in your formula field. So then you'll use that field over here. Once you create the field, you'll have to refresh this screen, and then we want to look for this to be false because we do not want to create campaign influence records on closed lost or closed won opportunities. We only want to create them on open opportunities. Next, what we're going to do is make this say all records, and then we're going to do a get. We are going to get campaign influence records now. And this is going to be get all campaign influence records. We're going to look for the contact ID of the campaign influence record to match the contact ID of our campaign member. And then we also want to look for the campaign influence records where the opportunity is not closed. Now, if you do not have this field here either, this is a formula field on the campaign influence object. So you'll go to your object manager, you'll go to your campaign influence object, and you will create a new formula field just like you did on the opportunity contact role that will help you find whether or not the op is closed. So I'll show you what that looks like quickly here. Closed, you can insert that in, and that's all you need. And then you'll be able to use that in your criteria right there. Next, we're going to look for all of our campaign influence models because we're going to use this for all of our models that we create. And we're going to do something similar to what we did before. We're only going to look for the active ones and the ones with a model type of 2. And then we want to get all records there. And let me make sure I put all records up here because I always forget that. All right, let's save this. I'm going to call this campaign member, campaign influence record automation. Okay, now we're going to loop campaign influence models. We're going to choose the campaign influence model record collection, and then we're going to do a decision that looks for which model. Our first model is First Touch, and then we're looking at the current loop of our campaign influence records, and we're looking for the developer name to be First_Touch. Now we're going to filter our campaign influence collection that we have up top here. We're getting all campaign influence records, not only the records for a certain model, because this flow is going to work for all of our models. So we'll do one get, and then we'll do collection filters for each model type to select the specific model that we're looking for. So this will be called filter campaign influence First Touch. I'm going to filter my campaign influence records, and then I'm going to look for the model name equals First Touch. Now, if you don't have a model name field, then you can create that as a formula field. So you can go back to your campaign influence object, you can create a new formula field. I'm adding a 1 on mine because I already have this field created. And then you can go to the campaign influence model object right here. And then you can go to model name. And then you'll insert that, and that's going to be your model name, the friendly name. And then that will allow you to filter for model name equals First Touch in this filter collection. All right, our next step is to add a loop right here. And we're going to loop through this filtered campaign influence collection. I'll type in filter here, and this is this collection right here. Next, we're going to add an assignment. And we're going to assign the op IDs to variable. We're going to create a new variable. It's called var existing op IDs. And this is going to be a text variable, and we're going to allow multiple values to come in here. So we're going to collect all of the existing campaign influence records that have a model that's from the First Touch model, and we're going to add the op ID to this variable because we don't want to create more campaign influence records for opportunities that already have a First Touch record. All right, so we are going to add the item from the loop just like that. So this should say loop First Touch campaign influence, and we're going to add our opportunity ID in there. Next, we're going to add an assignment element out here. And this is going to assign the model name. We're going to create a new variable called var model name. And that will be a text. And that is going to equal the loop of the campaign influence model. And then we're going to choose the model name from there, which is the master label. Now you may be asking, why are we assigning the model name here? So you'll see why in our subsequent videos, because we're going to use this same flow for more than one model. And then we want to use the loops that we're going to put down here for our other models. So we need to assign the model name a little bit earlier in the process. All right, now we're going to do another loop here. And we're going to loop through our opportunity contact roles. We're going to do our opportunity contact role collection from our get, and then we're going to add a decision element here. And we're going to call this first touch campaign influence exists. We will say yes here. And then we're going to check this text collection here to see if it contains the opportunity ID from the current item in the loop of the opportunity contact role. So that would be this right here, and we'll choose opportunity ID there. And then we also want to check that the campaign influence model, the current item in that, the label name, or we'll use the developer name actually here, first touch. Okay, so this will make sure that it's going to check to see if the opportunity already has a campaign influence record for first touch, and that the current loop, the model that we're working with, is coming from the first touch model. Now, if campaign influence records do exist for this particular opportunity, then we don't want to do anything. So we're just going to let things flow down there and then go in the loop to go to the next opportunity contact role record. If they don't exist, then what we want to do is assign the campaign influence fields to a record. So we're going to do an assignment element here, and we're going to assign campaign influence fields. And we're going to create a new variable that is a record, and we will call this var campaign influence record. This will be a data type of record, and it's going to be for the campaign influence object. We're not going to allow multiple values because this is just a record where we're going to assign all the fields so we can create our records at the end of the loop. So first we're going to assign our contact ID, and that's actually going to come from the campaign member that started this flow. Next, we're going to assign our campaign ID. That is also going to come from the campaign member record that started the flow. Then we need to assign the model ID. And that's going to come from the current item in the loop from the campaign influence model loop. So we'll select the ID right there. And then last, we're going to assign the opportunity ID. And that's going to come from the current loop of the opportunity contact role. Now you may see that we can map the opportunity contact role in this campaign influence record, but don't fall for that. It doesn't work. It can't be resolved in the flow. I don't know why. It works if you just assign the contact in the opportunity. Just one of those things. We're going to add another assignment, and we're going to add these records to a collection. we'll create a new collection variable to collect our campaign influence records. This will be a data type of record. We are going to allow multiple values in here now, and then we'll choose the campaign influence object. We'll choose add here because we're going to add our campaign influence records as they loop through. And then we'll save that. And then let's zoom out of here. And then we can see we have our campaign influence model loop up here, and then we loop through our opportunity contact roles. So after the last arm in here coming off of our last loop, that's where we want to put our create records element. This will be called create campaign influence records. And this is where we'll choose that collection that we just created. You'll click save, you'll click activate, and now you're ready to test this. We're going to go back to our opportunity that we've been working with, and we're going to add Danny back as a contact role to this op. Then our campaign influence record is created perfectly for the first touch model. We're going to go to Danny's contact, and we're going to open up the second opportunity that Danny is a part of. Wanting to show you a scenario that you may run into if you don't update your existing records. So in this scenario, I have Danny listed as a contact role on this opportunity, but there's 0 campaign influence records. The flows that we're building today assume that you have updated your existing records to put in the missing campaign influence records that should be there. In this scenario, our flow is expecting this opportunity to already have a first touch campaign for Danny, and it's assuming that Danny doesn't have any other campaigns associated with their record. Now, can we update our flow to satisfy this scenario? Yes. Do we need to? In my opinion, no. If you're going to have all your data up to date, which you should do so you can make it reportable. So if you do not do that, let's show you what happens. So I'm going to add Danny to a campaign here. And if we go to the grassroots opportunity here, we can see that the campaign that I just added Danny to created a first touch record. And this one's not right. If we go to this other opportunity and we look at the campaign influence here, we can see that this is the correct first touch for this particular opportunity. If we come here and we remove Danny, and then we add Danny again, we can see that a first touch campaign is added for Danny. Now it's a different one that's on the other opportunity. And that's because the created date of this opportunity is much earlier. It's March 27th, 2023. So there's a different campaign that's considered the first touch for this particular opportunity. So one thing you can do to trigger an update to all existing records, and this is only if your created dates and last modified dates don't matter, which you could seed if you needed to, but you can delete your opportunity contact role records and re-import them, and that would trigger all of your flows to run and then update your campaign influence records for all your models. All right, our next step is to create a flow that is going to update the influence percentages for our campaign influence records. You can see in our first touch example here that our campaign influence records have a 0% influence. We can hop over to our other opportunity and we can see the same thing over there. So we're going to go into our flow builder and we are going to create a new flow. We'll click new flow. This is going to be an auto launched flow. The reason why we're choosing auto launch flow is because we are going to use this as a subflow in 2 other record triggered flows, and we don't want to create the same components twice. All right, our first step here is to do a get records. And this is called get all campaign influence records. Our object is going to be campaign influence. And then we're going to look for all of the campaign influence records that are related to a specific opportunity ID. Now we're going to create a variable here. We'll call this var opportunity ID. It'll be a text data type, and we're going to make it available for input. This is so that we can pass the opportunity ID from our two other flows into this subflow. Now we're going to choose all records here. And then our next step is to do a decision element, because we're setting ourselves up to be able to use this for more than one custom model. So we'll call this which model, and our first model is going to be for first touch. And then we're going to create another variable here. We'll call this var model developer name. This will be a text data type, and it will also be available for input because we're going to push this from our two other record triggered flows as a value as well. So we're going to look for first underscore touch. And then the first step that we're going to do, if there is a first touch model, we are going to do a filter. We will filter from model name equal to first touch. So we're going to pull our record collection variable here, and then we're going to look for model name equals first touch. Now the reason why we're doing this is because we only want to do one get records up here. We want to make this flow really efficient because we know that a lot of orgs have a lot of campaign members and they could possibly have a lot of opportunities. So to keep the processing down, we'll do one get, and then we'll do a filter for each model type when we add the other models to this flow. Your next step is to do an assignment here. And we're going to assign the total campaign influence count in our first touch collection filter. We're going to create a new variable. This will be called var campaign influence record count. This is going to be a number. It does not need any decimal places, and we're going to make the default value 0. And then we're going to say equals the count of our collection filter, because we want it to count the number of records that are in our record collection that's filtered for our first touch records. So you want to choose this one right down here. Our next step is to add a loop. And this is called loop filtered campaign influence first touch. And then we're going to have it loop the filter for model name first touch. Then we're going to do an assignment. And we're going to assign our campaign influence fields in records to a collection that we want to update the influence percentages for. We will create a record variable here. I'm going to call this var campaign influence record. Our data type will be a record, and the object will be campaign influence. So now what we need to do here is we're going to assign the ID from the loop of the record that we're looping through, because we want to update this record. This is the record that we want to update the influence percentage for. Then here's where we will update the influence percentage. And then we're going to do a formula here. And this is going to be a number. And then we're going to just do 100 divided by our variable that's counting the number of campaign influence records. So if there are 2 records that are coming into this flow, it's going to give each one an influence percentage of 50%. So it's going to give equal percentages to each record, depending on how many records that it finds. And then our last step is to add this to our collection, which we need to create a variable for. So we will say collect campaign influence records. This is going to be a record collection. We're going to allow multiple values in there, and the object is campaign influence. And then we will add our campaign influence record right here. And that's what that looks like. Then we'll come outside of the loop after the last one is done. And we're going to update our campaign influence records. And we're going to choose our collection variable that we created. We'll click save. And then we're going to give this a good name. We'll call this campaign influence percentage automation. And we'll give it a description. So this flow is a subflow used in 2 other record triggered flows to calculate the campaign influence record influence. All right, then we'll activate that. Our next step is to create a record triggered flow on the campaign influence object. So we'll select campaign influence here, and this is only going to fire when the record is created. Now we only want it to fire on those campaign influence records that are the custom models. So we have this formula field that's called campaign influence model type. If you do not have this formula field, you can go to your campaign influence object. You'll click new. And you'll do formula, and this is going to be your campaign influence model type. It's going to be text, and it's giving me an error because I already have a field named this. And then you're going to go to campaign influence model, and then you should have a model type field right here, and it's a pick list, so you'll insert that. And then you need to wrap it in a text function. Okay, so that is your formula field that you need for this flow to query the right records. And then when you create that formula field, refresh your flow here, and then you should see your formula field, and you're gonna look for that to have a value of 2. So we did review that in the part 1 video. And then we're just going to send this to our subflow. So our subflow was the campaign influence percentage automation. And then we are going to include both of these variables. These are both going to come from the campaign influence record that triggered this flow. and we are looking for the developer name of the model here. So that's what that looks like. Then we need to pass the opportunity ID. All right, and that's it for this one. So we'll click save. We'll give it a nice name, Campaign Influence Record Created for Custom Model. Give it a good description. And we'll activate this one. All right, our last step. Yay. We're gonna come over to our opportunity contact role deleted master flow. You're gonna open this one up and we're gonna bolt some things onto this. Now right here, we're going to add a loop element and we're going to loop our campaign influence records. And then we're going to add a decision element in here. And we're going to look for which model. And this one is going to be for First Touch. And we're looking for the current item in the loop, the model's developer name to be First Touch. Next, we're going to check to see if the collection contains First Touch. Right here, we're going to create a new variable that's going to collect all of the model names for us. We're going to make this a text collection, allow multiple values, and we're going to check to see if this contains First Touch. You'll see what we're doing here in a second. Now, if that variable doesn't contain First Touch, then we're going to come down this side and we're going to do an assignment, and we're going to assign the model developer name to 2 places. So we're going to add the model developer name to this collection variable. And then we're going to set another variable. I'm going to create a new one here called var model developer name. And this is going to be available for output. And this is going to have the same value as this. Then our next step is to send this to the subflow. So we're going to look for this campaign influence percentage automation. And then we're going to include both of our variables here, our var model developer name and our var opportunity ID. So this is our opportunity contact role flow. So the opportunity ID is going to come directly from the record that triggered the flow. So we'll just pull the opportunity ID from there. Our var model developer name, we actually assigned in our flow. And so we have that, and that's it there. Now let's explain what's happening here. In this record triggered flow, whenever an opportunity contact role is deleted, we are getting all of the campaign influence records for that particular contact and opportunity, and then we're deleting them. but we need to recalculate the campaign influence percentages for the remaining campaign influence records. So this is the reason why we bolted on this part. We're going to loop through the campaign influence records. We're going to figure out if we deleted any campaign influence records for the first model. If we did, then we're going to trigger this to go to the subflow and then query the campaign influence records that exist over there, and then it'll find the first touch ones and it'll update the influence percentages over there. Now, the reason why we checked to see if First Touch already exists in our developer name collection is because we don't need to send this to the subflow for more than one record. Only one record needs to go down there because it only needs to calculate the influence percentages once for the remaining campaign influence records. So that's why we put this decision element in there. And that's going to be helpful when we have our other custom campaign models because we'll treat these the same way. All right, so we'll do a save as on this. We'll activate it and then we're ready to test this. We're going to come over to our first opportunity that we've been testing with. And we're going to first delete our 2 contact roles here. And then we're going to add them back. I'll add Danny, and then I'll add Bryn. Now we would expect to see 2 campaign influence records, yay, with each with 50% because there's 2 records here that exist. If there was 3, then each one would have 33%. So that's great. That looks like it's working perfectly. Let's just go run another test over here on this particular example. So we'll remove Danny here. We'll add Danny back. And then we're going to expect to see that Danny has a 100% influence, which we do. So that's all working perfectly. All right, you've successfully set up your 5, how many flows do we do? 6? I don't know, I lost count. To do your First Touch campaign attribution. Congratulations. That's it. That's a wrap. Be sure to subscribe to Blue Tiger Academy so you don't miss out on the next video we are working on that will show you how to work with more advanced campaign influence models. We will explore applying a weighted distribution percentage to campaign influence records based on their campaign type. Let us know in the comments below if you have any questions or if you'd like to see a video on a different Salesforce topic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.